Welcome back to our cigars, and today we have a celebratory cigar. Actually, was created by the marketing team at CLE and Christian EIROA's home base for the specific purpose of handing it out at his 50th birthday, which was celebrated in Las Vegas. And this particular cigar, again created by the marketing team as a surprise to Christian EIROA, and it marks the 50th birthday and the 10th year anniversary of CLE being in business, so thus 5010. It also happens to be the official measurement for the specs, 50 ring gauge by 10 inches. But I did read an article on Half Wheel where the writer said he actually measured it and it came out to about a 52, which isn't really a big deal, but I figured I'd do the same, and I also came up with a 52. And they're labeling this a double robusto. Robusto's 5 inches, so they're saying this is a double robusto. I've seen this classified as a gigante and a gigante vitola, but also this can just be, in my opinion, be considered a toro, not a toro grande, but I would say a toro gigante. You say a double robusto, I can live with that as well. But nonetheless, the specs for the wrapper, binder, filler are undisclosed, but unofficially everyone pretty much feels that this is using high primings of Christian EIROA's famous authentic Corojo tobacco, and this Corojo tobacco is basically a superstar within the cigar world, and what they've done with it and how they've been able to develop lines using this authentic Corojo, which not everyone tends to love, but I think that a lot of us can appreciate it. Corojo definitely has a place in just about everyone's hearts, whether you know it or not. There's a lot of different Corojo varieties, of course, and none are quite as esteemed as Christian EIROA's and his fathers before him, and what they do on their farms organically. But I think that this was a cigar that was given out to guests. I believe each guest got 300 of these cigars, and it was so popular that they decided that they were going to release this cigar and have it distributed. So here we have a closer look at this Gigante cigar. This is just a giant cigar, right? I mean, this wasn't something that they intended to distribute or have distributed. This was just something that was, the marketing team felt that this would stand out and that this would be memorable. And they weren't wrong. It's certainly memorable anytime you get a giant cigar, but even more memorable if that giant cigar happens to be a very good cigar, or at least a decent cigar, because a lot of times these can be very gimmicky, and they can be, well, their origins are in that of novelty cigars dating back all the way back to the late 1800s, when you had individuals that would make giant cigars so that certain members of a traveling carnival could use them as props. Let's just say they had a particular giant as a part of their caravan, and that giant would then smoke these giant cigars, or even vice versa. You'd have one of the smallest individuals in the caravan, like a dwarf, that would be smoking a giant cigar like this, and it was just a spectacle to see. And it was just that. It was a novelty. Did the giant enjoy his large cigars? I read an article, and it dated back to the 1930s, and where this giant was actually said not to be much of a smoker, because he only smoked about 2 or 3 of these giant cigars a day, which I thought was hilarious, because the person writing the article from, I believe, the Telegraph back in 1933 or 31 actually was quite serious about it. Like, yeah, the giant wasn't quite a smoker, and he was talking about the expense that was made in order to get the cigars. So here it's covered by tissue paper, which is I think a good idea for a cigar of this size. It just helps protect the cigar. I'm not saying it wouldn't look as elegant with a cellophane. It would kind of look like sort of like the way people put vinyl coverings on their sofas back in the 80s. Hey, I know. and then you start getting sweaty and you stick to them. But it was a thing. So it's quite a lovely looking cigar. So we can look at the band here. There you go. So what you're looking at here, it says DESDE, and then you see 1916. So DESDE would translate to since 1916, and here you have HECHO 2013, and so made in 2013. Actually, I'm so sorry. I don't know if that's a 2013. Let me check again. Yeah, it is a 2013. It does say. So I've had this cigar for about 3 months now, and been waiting for the right moment. And I just, the weather today was just, it's hard to argue with a 76 degree, 35% humidity day. Sunny, no clouds. Again, I am really ecstatic about how nice of a day it is. And when you're going to smoke a cigar, for as long as I'm going to smoke this cigar, I think you really need a nice day. You really, because if it's too hot, you're going to get anxious. You might want to put it down, maybe not follow up with it. It'll turn off a lot. It might not taste the same. Or you might just altogether not come back to it that day. If it's too cold, you know how it works. Wrapper cracking, this sense of I should be inside sometimes. But when you have a day like today, and it could even be a few degrees warmer, and I think it'd still be great, you got to take advantage of it. Now, I think a lot of us, or maybe a few of us, have all had a large cigar at some point. Either it was a gag, or you truly got into smoking the larger cigars, or you're a big individual, so you feel that it's what you need to satisfy you. Many people over the course of history, when told by their doctors that they needed to cut back on cigars per day, actually instead smoked less but bigger cigars, longer cigars. And originally, back in the day, they were big, but they were not as big as they are today. So we're talking 1905. The average size of a cigar is between 4 and 5 inches. A 7-inch, which 7 by 48, what we would know now as a Churchill, was considered a very large cigar. So taking that into consideration, this is a 10 by 50, 52, right? You're looking at a 7-inch Churchill size being considered in almost the same way we would look at this Gigante, this double Robusto, Gigante Toro. But and then you've got like the double Coronas, that are also classified in the Gigante Vitola size. We're talking about usually cigars that are measuring 9 inches or more, and they're not necessarily 50 ring gauge. They could be a 44, 48. They are not always the same size. So you look at different parts of cigar history when cigars became a status, when they were very well established as a status of wealth. You did have individuals that were very rich that would pay to have specialty cigars made for them, extremely large cigars made for them, Cuban ones at that. And a great example of that was J.P. Morgan. It's said that J.P. Morgan would buy these 9-inch cigars for $3 in New York City, and he was one of the few men that could afford to buy such a large cigar, and well made as well. So we're not just talking about any old scrap heap. He was getting fine Cuban tobacco from a specialty roller in Cuba, and he was having these especially rolled for him. They were on the darker version, so that tells me that more than likely the leaf was the Maduro leaf. It was a very deep Maduro leaf, and those were the ones that he preferred. Now, did he enjoy them? I mean, who's to say? I don't know if he enjoyed them or not. I suppose if he kept smoking them, he did enjoy them, right? But it was more of a message to everyone else and it's, that old, pissing contest type of thing. We're all going to measure up, and it was something that politicians and world leaders had been doing anyway, dating back in the early 1800s, when there would be political debates and political issues, and everyone would bring in their cigars. Everyone chose a different, not necessarily different vitola size, because back then you had your basic vitola sizes, which were your panatelas, right? Panatelas, Coronas, and then you had your my God, I can't think of it right now, but there was a third size as well, the perfectos, and you had these sizes, and these were the established sizes. And of course, in Cuba, you had a lot of other different names for a couple of different vitolas, but for the most part, you have your world leaders sitting there. They're more than likely all smoking panatelas of different sizes, right? And maybe you've got some Coronas in the mix as well. And then there's that one dude, that's got a gigante cigar, like a huge Lancero, or a huge Lonsdale or something like that. And he's just smoking it, and they're blowing smoke in each other's faces when they're making points. And it was a customary thing. Everyone understood that this was just part of the negotiations. This was part of talking things over. But you did have that dude, right? That dude that had to show up with the biggest cigar. Was he insecure? Was he just trying to make a point? Can't say he's insecure. We don't know that. It could just very well be he's just fucking with people's minds, or trying to, by smoking something like that. Remember that tobacco in the early days was pretty strong. Okay, it wasn't as finely tuned as what we have today. So one would gather that even a milder cigar back in the 1800s, early 1900s, was still a pretty medium-bodied cigar today. And this is just going off of things that I've read in regards to the flavor profile and the strength of many different types of cigars from different tobacco regions, primarily Cuba, though. And their descriptions of how strong this tobacco was, and how, everyone knew that Mexico was the place to go get really, really strong tobacco. Sometimes it was a little green. This actually tastes pretty good. There's a nice spice on it. A little pepper zing. It's got a earth. I'm still trying to identify, but as it's just about going into the first inch, I'm gonna try to determine more of what I'm tasting, and along the way, we're just gonna talk a little bit about what it's like with smoking a large cigar, or our preferences with larger cigars, because it's just a preference thing, really. This happens to be a pretty good cigar so far. It's into the first inch. Draw is really good. Nothing's overwhelming. It's just a medium-bodied, medium. I'm sure it's going to ramp up to medium full, but right now it's pretty easy going, and it's delivering. It's a little saltiness that I'm detecting on the tongue, but as it develops, really, you think about the shift to larger ring gauge cigars, and that's a different thing than a longer cigar, obviously. Although you do have a lot of those higher ring gauge cigars measuring in at 6-7 inches, even a few extremes of 80 by 80s. Tom Lazuka was actually the person who handed these cigars out at Christian EIROA's birthday party in Las Vegas. And it's very fitting because, when you think of Tom Lazuka, you think of Asylum Cigars, you think of the Ogre, you think of a lot of these large cigars. And he was at the forefront of really pushing it forward. I'm not saying he was the first. We all know that kind of started with Ernesto Perez Carrillo and his idea of making a larger ring gauge cigar that would appeal to certain individuals in EIROA's case, in his relationship with Luzuka, EIROA actually did not believe that the trend would stick around. He actually felt that the larger ring gauge cigars, novelty that they were going to stay that way, and they weren't going to really progress, and you weren't going to have everyone making a large ring gauge cigar. But of course, he was proven wrong, and thankfully, his business deal with Luzuka followed through. And as you can see, the things that Tom Luzuka has done with these eye-catching 80 by 87 by 70 cigars, whether or not they are of the highest quality and they appeal to the hardcore aficionados, that's not really the point. The point is that they've kind of stuck around, and there's a market for them, and people do desire to smoke these cigars. I don't personally see them very often when I go to a cigar lounge or cigar places. Maybe they smoke them in private. Maybe it's just more of a thing of I get one cigar a day, or I get so little opportunities to smoke a cigar, so when I do, I want to smoke a really big cigar and smoke for a really long time. So I get that. That goes back to the whole example of that I gave of perfect example of Samuel Gompers, who was told by his doctor to cut back on cigars per day. So he decided he was going to switch to a 12-inch cigar. But he's just one example of that. It could be that. It also could be, as I've mentioned in the past, the value for your money. You figure you're getting a whole lot more tobacco, so you are actually saving money, and you, of course, get to smoke for a long period of time along with that. This wasn't that. This wasn't something that they were going to put on the market, right? This was sort of a happy accident. And it was just something that they put out there. And I've been seeing a lot more of these types of cigars being put out by the established cigar legends. And when I think about it, it's not long ago that I purchased a set of cigars from Nelson Alfonso Producción Limitada, which is a limited edition of his initial offerings under his name. And one of them included was a Gigante, I think about 9.5 by, I believe, almost a 50 ring gauge as well, and or even more. I think it's 55. So I've seen these offerings, and you look back in history, Cuba did not only just make these specialty cigars for exclusive distributions to millionaires or billionaires or what have you at that time. They also made them in regular production as well. You could buy them. We're talking about the Guavas and different cigars that were just made in a large vitola size. But again, they were rare and they weren't common, and you didn't normally see people smoking them because they were rather expensive. So you had to make a certain kind of money to afford these cigars. So flavor-wise, it's gotten woodsy and a little bit creamier, but I'm still getting that earthiness with that spice and pepper notes. And I've been enjoying it. I really have. So I'm past that first inch already. And I'm looking at the mindset for this cigar, right? You wanted something to stand out, something that would also be pleasing to the smoker. Because, you've got all these guests coming in. Some of them are very famous guests and love guests, and you want them to smoke something good. So you don't want to just make a novelty. You don't want to just, even though it's in the size of one, but you want to provide with a good smoking experience. And we're going to take another look at the band. I know we took a look at the band earlier as I was talking, and there was just something that I forgot to mention. So when you look at the band EIROA, and at the top here you have SALUD, which translates to good health, salud. AMOR, buena salud would be good health, but salud, health. AMOR, love. Pesetas. Now that one got me for a minute, and I started to think about it, and then I said to myself, wait a minute, pesetas was the Spanish currency from the mid 1800s, I believe, to as late as 2000. And pesetas were, again, along with the French franc, they were considered that currency. But also, this could be relating to the awards that people win for different things, and that were given as a stamp of authenticity. So I'm just gonna guess that that's what they're referring to pesetas as in awards. Pesetas also translates to, of course, a quarter, 25 cents, because that's the origin of the value, right, of the peseta, 25 cents. And at the bottom here, you have Calidad Superior, superior quality. At the top, you have Tradicion, tradition. Tabacalera. Basically, a tabacalera is where you make your cigars, right? And we went over the other ones, HECHO and DESDE. I just wanted to, because I forgot that. Hey, so on the Eastern Coast, MSRP for this cigar was $30. But I think given what I've experienced so far and how well crafted it is, and of course, the large amount of tobacco being used here, I don't think it's overpriced. So far, that's my opinion so far. It can change, but I don't think it's overpriced so far. Just from what I've gotten from the first 2.5 inches, it's been really good. Its creaminess, the woodsy notes, it's been good. In a way, and it's been a while, it has reduced itself to what one would say is a regular size Robusto. And once you get the first couple of inches off, you kind of get into that groove or that feeling of, I'm now beginning to smoke a Churchill. Slightly more girth to it, but a Churchill nonetheless. And at that point in time, the cigar doesn't feel as awkward in your hands anymore. But regardless of the size of the cigar, it just, from beginning up until this very point, which is what I can speak of too, it has been a really good cigar. There's a certain sweetness that you get. There's that saltiness with the earth and the woodsy creaminess. And actually, there's a point in time where you kind of, it has a very Cuban-esque feel and profile to it. And it makes sense to me, because when you think of the authentic Corojo, right? The authentic Corojo, the Corojo the way it used to be in Cuba, the Corojo that really propelled the Cuban cigar industry to where it was. And obviously, even though now Corojo is outlawed in Cuba and it's just too difficult to grow, as is Pelo de Oro and what have you, there are just certain varieties that you just have to move past because of the trouble that you have with them in regards to mold and insects and things like that, just how delicate they can be. But overall, you get this feeling of a Cuban-esque flavor to the cigar, and using this authentic Corojo, and there's no air quotes to this at all, it's authentic Corojo. It's a different kind of Corojo than anything else you got out there. And yeah, it does harken back to that time when Cuban cigars used the Corojo tobacco exclusively for their cigars, and you basically had this flavor profile that, well, I can speak to, that Americans fell in love with, but the whole world fell in love with. And so this saltiness, the earthiness, the woodsy notes, they're all there. The blend is very even keel. It's very well balanced. The strength, when you get to that Churchill size, the strength just kicks up just a notch, just a bit. Nothing crazy, just a little bit more strength. And then you get more of that pepper as well in the finish. And an excellent aroma to boot goes along with this. But also, I gotta go back to the finish on this cigar. The finish is just, to me, pristine. Just a clean finish. Nothing lingers for too long, and there are no harsh notes of any kind. I've had this cigar only 3 months in the humidor, and I've kept it in my new humidor at about, I'm gonna say 62 degrees, because I kept this one in an electric humidor. It's 62 degrees temperature at about 64 RH is where I kept this baby. And again, like I mentioned, today is a very low humidity day. Actually, since I've been smoking this, the temperature went from 75 to about 71, and I've had to take a bathroom break. There's been some re-ups on the water. I had to change my shirt, obviously, because it got a little chillier. So some things have happened in the whole cigar smoking experience with this one, because it's been such a big cigar to start with. And I'm going to give you this much information on it, and that is that so far for me, this is really worth purchasing. It's really worth experiencing. That's what I think. My girlfriend came in on one of her breaks, and she said, "You're still out here?" Yeah, I'm still out here. You've been out here quite a while. She's like, but I saw the size of the cigar, and I know you smoke cigars a little faster sometimes, but what's the deal? And I said, well, to be honest, yeah, I do smoke cigars sometimes a little faster than some, but I also know how to enjoy a cigar and ease up a bit and just sit back and really enjoy the full experience. So she tried it, and she said, you know what? It's actually better than some of the Cuban cigars you've been smoking. Now, if you ask me what are some of those Cuban cigars you've been smoking, I couldn't tell you right off the top of my head, what some of those are, but maybe better than some custom rolls I've had, and definitely some, not all. You got custom rolls that are superior to others, but I'm talking about Cuban custom rolls. There's a video on that as well. You can check that out. But she actually said, yeah, it's better than some of the Cubans that you've been smoking. And now, what I would say to that, and what I did say to that, is, yeah, you're right. It actually is, or at least on par with some of them. And she said, what kind of tobacco is that? Because it kind of reminds me of Nicaragua. And I said, well, you're not too far away. It's actually Honduras. And yeah, she's like, oh yeah, throw a stone away. And I said, yeah, it's really well done. And she said, I like the little that I got from it, the little that I smoked, the creaminess and some of that spice was there. And she's not a big fan of the spice, but she said that was really well done, and it was nice and smooth. And I think that when you have a nice smooth cigar that's well balanced, using high primings of top quality Honduran, look, I was about to say Nicaragua, Honduran leaf, especially that of the EIROA family Corojo, you do get something that's quite impressive and quite distinctive and quite appealing. I find it very appealing. I just see myself buying another one of these. And in regards to aging these, this is 3 months, and I feel like this is good. You could probably age them for a year or two, and I think you would just get a really nice smoothed out cigar where a lot of the strength in that second half tones down a bit, as in most cases. But for me, I just love the way it is right now, fresh, and I wouldn't wanna age it to smoke, but then again, I've never aged a giant cigar, so maybe this is the opportunity to do so. But at $30 a pop, they're not cheap. But man, this sweetness combined with that salty earthiness enveloped in creaminess, I'm really loving this. I guess one of the better things of the experience has been that it's been good from start to where I'm at. And when you get such a large cigar and you're smoking and you're investing so much time, you're carving out a day for the experience, you want it to be a good tasting cigar. You want it to be a good cigar smoking experience. And whether or not you're into the Cuban-esque flavor profile, or whether or not you like a medium to a full-bodied cigar, because maybe you're into a milder cigar with more sweetness and less pepper and spice, that's okay. I think that you can still appreciate this. Is this a hardcore aficionado cigar? I wouldn't say so, but I would say that this is definitely a cigar that hardcore aficionados can definitely appreciate and really, really appreciate it. Whereas a newbie may or may not be overwhelmed, but also may not have the experience or the knowledge of appreciating something like this. Or maybe they have the knowledge, but it still falls back on your preferences and what you prefer. So a lot of that is part of it. So with this cigar, I really think that man, it's good. I don't know who blended this cigar. As far as I know, the information that has been everyone that has been aware of the information knows that it was something that the marketing team did, and in conjunction with the factory. So, EIROA did not know about the cigar. That is what the official line is, because it was a surprise for his party. So that's why he didn't know. But once they decided to put it into production and distribute it, I don't know if there were any kind of tweaks made to the cigar's blend, or if anything was considered for the cigar to be released under EIROA's supervision, of course. So I don't, I want to believe that it was good enough that EIROA was just, pleased to just distribute it in the way that it was. But we don't really know if, and maybe that information's out there. I wasn't able to locate that information, but maybe it's out there. What happens when you take a cigar that wasn't meant to be distributed and you start to produce it and distribute it? What changes? Obviously, I know that from stories of speaking with Martinez cigars that sometimes tweaks are made. Steve Saka has talked about tweaking certain cigars. Sosa, Espinosa, that they've talked about it. So, people make these little things, these little changes, but, we don't know, and sometimes it's all for the better. So I'm back with my final summary, and obviously what I'm going to report is that this long journey has approached its end, or is approaching its end, and it's really been a good journey. I mean, I think that the cigar has changed in the final third, where the pepper notes kicked up a bit. You still got a little bit of that earthiness with the salt, but the cream was gone, and then you got more of that wood and oak, and you got some of that earth with a little bit of salt, yes, but more of the pepper notes coming forward. Obviously was at full body, and it kind of ticked up in strength after the first half, but this had notes of sweetness and cream, and I thought it was complex. I thought it was a good cigar. I think it's highly recommendable. And as you can see, I'm at 3 hours and 21 minutes. And that's where I'm at so far. And of course, I will continue smoking this and probably get to like about here. Unless it's really delicious, then I'll nub it. But give or take, that's going to be another 20 minutes, Still smoking like a champ. The aroma's still good on this. What can I say, folks? Ladies and gentlemen, I want to thank you all for taking the time to watch this long format review of a cigar that maybe many of you haven't tried, and bearing with me through this long journey and just watching to see how it ends. I want to thank you all, ladies and gentlemen, and until next time, I will see you in Backyard Cigars.